Good afternoon. My name is Talha Köse. I'm the director of SETA Brussels office. So today we're going to touch on an important issue, the current escalation of relations between Greece and Turkey and possible consequences of this escalation to the regional security. As you know, there is occasional ups and downs between Turkey and Turkish-Greek relations. We have experienced in 2020 summer another cycle of escalation. And we know in the past, in 1990s, there were much more stronger fluctuations and escalations in relations, the Kardak-Imia crisis. And we also know that there are a set of issues that both parties do not agree, including the territorial waters issue, air space, Eastern Mediterranean issue, continental shelf issue. So, but there are other issues that can bring both parties together. So, increasing regional tensions, Ukraine crisis, energy vulnerability, and many other issues, including the environment as well as the maritime security. So, unfortunately, during the escalation periods, we often focus on the issues that contradict the parties, but there are also some overlapping issues. So, rather than focusing just on the issues that contradict between the parties and rather than points of disagreement, today we're going to touch on, yes, the issues that the perceptions of the parties, major issues of disagreement, but we would also try to bring a broader understanding, a broader, more inclusive framework for regional security and joint understanding. So as a SETA foundation, we also try to portray, propose some solution mechanisms, to the policy makers as well. So today, the purpose of this exercise, the purpose of this panel is to both understand underlying issues, perceptions, misperceptions of the parties between Turkey and Greece, as well as some issues that may bring parties together to work and some of the legal and security-related obstacles to those issues. So we have three very distinguished scholars today who spent their academic time for studying the issues between Turkey and Greece, and between Eastern Mediterranean and Cyprus issue and broader Mediterranean issues. So today our first speaker will be Zuhal Mert Uzuner from Marmara University. We have Professor Yücel Acer from Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University and Demilitarization from PRIO Cyprus Center. So we will go according to, first of all, Professor Uzuner will try to outline the broader issues of perceptions and misperceptions between Turkey and Greece and why the situation escalated in the last couple of months. So she will try to bring both perceptional as well as more concrete issues and try to outline the current underlying dynamics of the current escalation. So Professor Uzuner, please.
Thank you. Thank you for invitation and being among the prominent scholars. I may talk many things actually about perceptions because, you know, the Turkish-Greek relations have a very long history, and in my classes I always refer that this is not an interstate relations. It is much more than this interstate and politics. It is the relations between people. So these two people know each other actually for long years, but you know, we are social beings, social animals, so we are learning many things, and at the end nothing is so physical. Actually everything is so much constructed in this the field of perceptions. And today I thought maybe it is interesting for us to refer all this perception world in order to understand today's difficulties we face in front of, let's say, the solution of the problems. When we look at this final, the rising tension in between two countries, we can see that again there is the reference to this, the problem of trust. These two leaders of two countries were accusing each other about this reliability of partnership, reliability of an ally. So this shows us that still we are at the same place, because when you look at the background of this Turkish-Greek problems, you can see that always there was a kind of suspicious perspective towards the intention of the other side. So when you look at the Greek perspective, you may see that the rising tension is related with the changing dynamics of the Turkish the discourse about the Aegean Sea. When you follow the Greek newspapers and Greek the discussions on the primetime TV shows, it is so obvious that there were so many references from history, but they are all connected with the contemporary change in international atmosphere. And we can refer in this frame to the rising problems in Baltic and in Ukraine. So both of them were somehow became a kind of provocative source of this tension, because we know that in the region, in Eastern Mediterranean, we were talking about some other problems related with delimitation of the exclusive economic zone, continental shelf, and also the territorial waters matters. So all are somehow they were in our agenda, but now we have some other problems too, and this is somehow related with also the Western security, international systemic, the earthquakes. So we need to underline that nothing is only related with Turkey and Greece here. So in these programs and TV shows and columns in Greek side, you can see that the people are considering all these things are somehow similar with Turkey and what Turkey asked from Greece, especially in Aegean Sea and in Cyprus. First of all, after the Ukrainian crisis, we can see that what happened in Ukraine is somehow similar with Cyprus. Why there is no support about Cyprus issue on the other side, you can see that all the Western public opinion somehow giving full support to Ukrainian case. And as a continuation of that, we can see the rising discussions about the militarization of islands. They are so close to Turkish coasts. We know that the eastern Aegean islands, and Turkey considered that as a source of this militarization of the islands are a kind of the problem for Turkish considerations, and they are considered as the militarized islands are considered as a serious, the vital security threat against Turkey. But from Greek perspective, it was very obvious that this is somehow related with the defensive capabilities of Greece, and that's why they have to do that. This is somehow promoted in these TV programs. Again, we can see something old and not old, never get old. This is the factor of fear and the kind of the lack of trust. This is again somehow at the backstage of all this, the discourses, the used terminology. And as a result of that, we can see the new terms started to be much more used in the daily discussions. One of them is the revisionism. It is somehow used so much in Greek public and in order to explain Turkish arguments about this militarization of islands. They are considered as kind of the proof. These Turkish arguments are considered as proof for showing this revisionism. When you look at the Turkish side, it is the opposite. That from the Turkish side, what is tried to be realized since the beginning of 2010s by Greek governments, by excluding Turkey from the table, from any platforms, and expanding all this exclusive economic zone without participation of Turkey, by taking support of European Union and the Western the allies. These were considered as a kind of source of the threat and a kind of maximalism. So you can see that both sides have a problem of trust, and they are in a kind of fear that if something happens, somehow a kind of negotiation that can create a source of this concession, and it can create a problem also for the domestic, the political power of the leaders. This is also somehow very problematic, especially for Greek leadership. And when I look at all this, the atmosphere, I see most important that the problem in this Greek-Turkish tension is this mental barriers. I mean, when you look at these discussions in both countries, it is so obvious that they are very offensive realists. That means if an actor wins something from this, the negotiation or any kind of solution, that is bad. If I mean, it's not a win-win situation. There is no possibility of the win-win situation for both countries. Whatever good for Turkey is considered as negative for Greece. If Turkey's strategic influence increase as a result of this Ukrainian war, it is negative against Greece. Another problem, again, you can see is a kind of mental barrier. There is a kind of hope to break out all the ties between two countries. There is a kind of the feeling that the existing the ties, alliances are somehow the fake, and they must be replaced, and the existing ties shall be broken. This is so dangerous and somehow different, as I mentioned, in case of this revisionism discourse, because in case of NATO, we see that there is a full support for this exclusion of Turkey from all Western platforms, Western security systems. There is a huge propaganda about that, and this is somehow the dangerous and wrong, actually, because it is a very important tool for Greek-Turkish negotiations. It can create a base for Turkey and Greece for coming closer, finding a common platform to solve their problems. So, and another interesting point, according to me, is the existing trends in Greece is changing. It's not somehow related with the last year. Maybe we have to talk about the last 5 years. We see the rising, the United States bases in Greece. It is considered a kind of similar attempt of Greece at the beginning of the century. In 1919. So for Turkish consideration, this is a neo-Venezuelism. And sometimes you can see the references to Megali Idea, but it is wrong, because Megali Idea has its own, let's say, the details, maybe we may discuss later, but I think what is discussed in Turkey is much more closer to this term of neo-Venezuelism, because we can see that being very, very pro Entente in case of Venezuela, and today very extreme supporter of US in all the policies, is considered a kind of the problem, especially from Turkish side. From Turkish side, this is a proof for showing how much Greece can closer to create a problem for Turkish territorial integrity. They may ask more, not only in sea, but more maybe in land. On the other side, you can see the same fear exists in Greece. According to Greeks, the gray zones argument and the militarization of the island and the questions about the sovereignty of this island as a result of this militarization is also another problem of territorial integrity. So there is a problem of this extreme securitization atmosphere, which is somehow promoted through this existing discourse. So what we may do, how we may promote solution in this atmosphere is really problematic, because one of the most important barriers, as I said, is this mental barrier in both sides. What has happened as positive for one side shall not be considered as negative. This Western security system, being the member in the same security mechanism, shall be considered as positive. NATO shall be considered as a functioning good mechanism to find the solution, and looking at the issue from the Western front. But these are not functioning. How we may overcome this problem is really, really big problem. And I can see that this can not be so easy because of the domestic political considerations at the end, how you will decrease the high, let's say, the demands which are somehow promoted through different the media channels. So today, this is the most important problem. This is the mindset and the exclusive the tendencies, somehow the elimination of all multilateral platforms in Greek-Turkish relations. These are the key problems, and not somehow directly related and connected with these problems of perceptions of both countries, which are mostly depending on lack of trust, reliability, and worries of security. Thank you.
Very much, Zuhal Hocam. Yes, I mean, there is a major shift in the perceptions, and unfortunately, we can see that this zero-sum thinking may be initiated so fast in Turkish-Greek relations. Unfortunately, we have seen that occasionally in the last couple of years, and in the past, we also have some experience. But, you know, these, as you mentioned, you know, these militarization, securitization is a larger process, and despite all maybe 2 decades of confidence-building efforts, it becomes so fast to turning into, again, zero-sum thinking, and evaporation of the existing trust happens so fast. And you also mentioned some mechanisms to address, resolve this, like the multilateral platforms, European security, and joint interests. So now I'm going to turn to Professor Yücel Acer. So Professor Acer will be focusing on some of those multilateral platforms, international law, and international institutions that may bring parties closer. There are definitely some major issues of legal disagreement, and those issues can be resolved through certain processes. But I think the major issue is how to formulate all these arguments along international law, and what may be the incentives. Yes, I mean, in the past we have seen incentives, but the joint threat perceptions unfortunately do not turn into an incentive for the parties. So Professor Acer, what's your take on this issue of legal disagreements, legal processes, and also institutional frameworks that may bring parties closer to each other, or that may contradict parties' positions?
Thank you, Talha. Good afternoon. After Zuhal described the general framework of relations between 2 countries, and as well as between 2 communities, she actually mentioned a couple of significant, obstacles, like, psychological or mental, barriers between 2 communities. That's quite significant actually to understand and to remember these obstacles if we would like to go further. However, whenever we start to talk about the relations between Greece and Turkey, we should also talk about the legal aspects. There is a significant reason for this. Whenever Turkey or Greece start to accuse each other for many things, they mostly refer to violations of international rules by one or another. So that's why almost all the crises have been created on this basis, accusing illegal acts or statements. So that's why we should also remember that there are some significant legal aspects of the relations between two countries. From this point, I will try to clarify how the recent tension between two countries recently emerged within the last 2 weeks, actually. Then I will try to clarify what legal accusations, in a sense, from both sides, and what could be the legal evaluations in quite general terms. In the last part, I will try to suggest a couple of positive attitudes to come over such tensions. In fact, as we all know, Greece and Turkey has a very long negotiation processes started just after the establishment of Turkish Republic in 1920s. Especially 1930s is another significant turning point in the negotiation process of two countries. We also know that this process of negotiation had its own ups and downs for many reasons. We have seen many good periods, like between 1999 and 2016 was quite successful period of negotiations in the sense that two countries came together at least 60 times under the exploratory talks process. At the same time, there were many visits and meetings between high-level officials like presidents and prime ministers. In the last 2 years, actually between 2019 and 2021, we had another tensions period concerning the Eastern Mediterranean. But luckily, we had another process of negotiation started in early 2021. The exploratory talks have been started again, and so far two countries had 3 meetings in that process. But unfortunately, within the last couple of weeks, we were again stuck in some tensions periods. Why and how this process, the negotiation process, has been halted, and how we came to a point to have a crisis again. I think, of course, there are very fundamental reasons, as Zuhal described, some psychological and perceptual elements. But there have been also some recent developments that had to, creation of this crisis, actually. As far as I can see, the Russian assault on Ukraine seems to be like a turning point in the recent process. I have seen some Greek official statements, concerning Turkey's attitudes during that war. And actually, Greece tried to say that Turkey was not properly, cooperating with, European countries, European Union or United States against Russia. So these kind of statements were followed by some other, you know, in a sense, you know, crisis-creating statements. You know, the arms sales to Turkey by United States and having some military bases in Greece. These kind of developments actually help to, you know, create another tensions period between two countries. But legally speaking, and I have followed that Greek officials emphasized that Turkey has been violating international law rules in the Aegean Sea, and in a sense that Turkey is becoming like a revisionist country and also becoming a threat not only to Greece but also to whole region. That were the statements made by Greek officials. You know, there were a lot of legal points in these statements, like, you know, Turkey has been violating the Greek national airspace frequently, especially towards the end of last month, and Greek foreign minister gave some figures how many times Turkey violated the Greek national airspace and how many times Turkish fighter jets flew over the Greek islands, populated Greek islands in the eastern Aegean Sea. So these kind of you know, statements actually try to show that Turkey has been violating international law rules. Another issue was which was taken by Greek officials was that Turkey, you know, started to question the sovereignty over certain islands in the Eastern Aegean Sea, you know, and this has been presented as another sign of Turkish, in commas, aggression in the Aegean Sea. And many other statements, you know, really contributed to the crisis to improve. But we are concerned with the legal aspects of these statements. And as I try to summarize, and especially the violation of Greek national airspace and the, you know, sovereignty issues were, you know, presented by Greece as an illegal acts according to international law. And I have seen many, you know, statements that Turkey was labeled as an aggressor state or a threat to Greece and to whole region. You know, if we look at the details, is it really, you know, the case that, you know, Turkey constantly violates international law rules in the Aegean Sea as against Greece or Greek rights? Let me only look at these two issues, you know, especially the Greek national airspace and the islands, demilitarization of islands, and some sovereignty issues. If we start with the, you know, Greek national airspace, it's a matter of fact for many years that, you know, there is a disagreement between Greece and Turkey about the extent of Greek national airspace. You know, it's technically the case that Greece applies 6 miles territorial waters, but 10 miles national airspace. So there is a 4 miles gap between these two areas, national areas actually. Both the territorial waters and the national airspace are parts of a country, of a state. So this 4 mile difference has been, you know, declared as unacceptable by Turkey and as illegal according to international law. So that's why we have seen many, you know, cases in the Aegean Sea that, you know, Turkey actually uses these 4 miles areas to show that it doesn't approve and accept in legal terms. So the violational arguments by Greece is not something new. You know, for many years, this happens in the Aegean Sea, unfortunately, two countries could not settle this issue in any way. So even today, maybe even today, in the day that we are now talking, maybe there could be some cases because there is a significant legal disagreement between two countries. So it has not been a very new case towards the end of last month that Turkey is doing such things. On the contrary, Turkey was accusing Greek fighter jets coming too close to the Turkish, territorial waters and sometimes violating some of them. And these kind of things actually happening, unfortunately, for many years. That's not something new. The second issue is demilitarization status of the Eastern Aegean islands. Turkey clearly states since 1960s that Greece has no right to militarize Eastern Aegean islands. Their numbers are about 18 islands. Some of them were demilitarized by Lausanne Peace Agreement, and some of them demilitarized by Paris Peace Treaty after the Second World War. And Turkey constantly, states that Greece is actually militarizing some of these islands in contradiction with international conventions. Since 1970s, Greece actually openly accepts that it is militarizing these islands, but try to put some legal justifications for its actions. So that's why this is another traditional dispute between two countries. That's not something new. Last 1 year, Turkey stated that based on the Vienna Convention on International Treaties, it has a right to suspend some of the articles if there is a material breach by the other side. That's not actually a political statement. It's quite a legal statement. Of course, there are some other interpretations of these articles of Vienna Convention. But actually, what Turkey tries to say that there is a legal right for Turkey to do this. Of course, Greece questions this, but it's a legal discussion actually, not a actual move by Turkish side to capture any of the Aegean islands. That's just legal statement, official statement referring to some international conventions. If Greece continues to militarize these islands, then other articles regulating sovereignty could become under discussion. That's what Turkey says. Actually, there is an official letter by Turkey last year in July 2021. Turkey sent an official letter to the United Nations explaining its own arguments about this issue. So that's why this issue is not something new. It's quite a traditional dispute, and there is no actually reason to create another tension over such matters since they have been there for many years, and the same statements and same actions actually. So it seems like there are some other motivations, rather political motivations from one side or another to create a tension. From our perspective, from Turkey's perspective, the Greek government is actually trying to create some political tension to get some gains in internal politics and also get some support from major countries like United States against Turkey. What I say as a conclusion is that we have seen for many years that these kind of acts to include the third countries into the bilateral relations did not really help and would not really help. And I'm sure it will not help at all. So that's why I think both countries should learn from the past that the better way is always to negotiate bilaterally the disputes in the Aegean Sea without involvement of third parties. Otherwise, whenever a third party involves, it brings its own disputes with other countries like Turkey or Greece. So it makes more complicated, and the process becomes quite complicated. That's the major point I think we should suggest. There is always a way forward, and the road is, as I say, the road is single, which is bilateral negotiations to find a way forward. Thank you, Talha.
Professor Acer, yes, you mentioned that both parties are making clear references to international law, and both parties try to justify their positions with reference to certain international agreements, and definitely there are positions that support arguments. However, those existing disagreements are not new. So the current escalation seems to be more related to political context and changing regional context and landscape. Of course, there are legalistic solutions and there are approaches to address these issues, but the key to, as far as I understand from your perspective, the key to these agreements, the key to these solutions is not through the concrete legalistic solutions, but a dialogue and a better negotiation that may bring parties to discuss their issues, not using the external parties, external actors for their purposes. So it seems that, yes, there are legal bases, but I think the key to solution is not leading at legal aspects. But that may provide us some guideline. So our third speaker is Haris Emiridis. So of course, the tension between Greece and Turkey is not isolated. What happens, they are part of similar multilateral platforms, and they are members of NATO. They are, Greece is a member of EU, and Turkey is a candidate country, but they have joint interest in Eastern Mediterranean and other issues. But despite all these similarities, multilateral agreements, and legal basis and the political basis, they have difficulties to talk their issues. Rather than using those platforms for resolution, I think both parties certainly refer those multilateral platforms against each other. So that's a key issue, especially from the Turkey's perspective. So, Hari, what may be the consequences of this disagreement for the regional security, and what may be the joint elements that they can focus, or who may be the actors that may bring those parties closer to each other? So as Yücel, Professor Acer and Zuhal also mentioned, that there are certain contextual factors that lead to this escalation. So are there any contextual factors that may turn this cycle of escalation to the reverse direction?
Thank you very much, Talha Bey, and thank you to the organizers for the kind invitation. I'm grateful to be with you, and let me just say that I'd love to share some thoughts with you, which are going to be very personal thoughts, if you like, and not necessarily reflect any of the institutions I'm associated with. I'm very grateful to Zuhal Hanem and to Yücel Hoca for their comments, because I think they paved the way nicely into our discussion. I'd like, if I may, with your permission, to do sort of a bridging between the two and bring in some perceptional, ideological, political elements, couple them with a little bit of the not legalistic but legal discussion, if you like, and perhaps drive into a way forward. I couldn't agree more with Zuhal Hoca that this is the part of the problem in bilateral relations is the huge mistrust that exists between the two peoples, perhaps the political elites or the leaderships. But this is, at the end of the day, the case. I also very much agree that, unfortunately, not only in Turkey and Greece, but in the broader Eastern Mediterranean, we rarely fight facts. We fight ghosts and perceptions. But at the end of the day, of course, it is perceptions that become the reality upon which people make up their minds. And the third general point is that, to me, Turks and Greeks really do not know each other. They believe they do, but I don't believe they actually know them, which allows for a space to be created with narratives, and unfortunately contesting narratives, to build with a lot of statements that really are not very helpful. So my personal suggestion would be for our discussion to go, if you like, 30,000 feet up. Take a helicopter view of the broader region. I would have said in the past Eastern Mediterranean, but I would like to open it a little bit more these days and include perhaps developments in Ukraine, because I think this gives us the measure of where things stand. In a sense, at the moment, we're faced with unprecedented issues at the European level, including a first major war, if you like, in the European space. And that, I think, should help us put things into perspective. That is, both evaluate bilateral differences under a prism of real problems, if you like. And I don't mean to downgrade them, but you have a very pressing, violent reality just in our neighborhood. And so that should put things into perspective. And secondly, how we can perhaps rethink bilateral and multilateral relations in a positive way by understanding that we are united by the bonds of common suffering, and we need to tackle these very independent problems, independent to us, but still important to tackle. And of course, there are other problems that we can talk about in a minute, like greater climatic problems, financial problems, environmental issues, and so on and so forth, that really are knocking our door beyond what we had until now. So if we go, as we say, 30,000 feet up and have a helicopter view, I think we need to have in our discussion realism. We need to have the sense of urgency for the solution of problems. We need to understand that nothing can be taken for granted, because things change globally and regionally, as the unfortunate situation in Ukraine highlights. But that we also need to do some thinking outside the box, because unfortunately the box has not led us very far until now. So if you look at the bilateral disputes, differences between neighbors, Turkey and Greece, but also others in the Eastern Mediterranean, I think we're going to find that all of these have been allowed to escalate. What I mean to say is that effectively we have a set of very old, if you like, bilateral and multilateral disputes, upon which new ones are stacked, like energy, like migration, delimitation issues, and so on and so forth. And every day that passes with all these disputes unresolved means that they're stuck one upon the other. There is addition and accumulation of these that make it much more difficult to deal with in the end. So the bilateral disputes have now been allowed to escalate to, if you like, multi-level, multi-actor, multi-layer, multi-issue ones. And that makes it exceedingly difficult to tackle. We had a set of disputes regarding, let's say, the Cyprus issue or bilateral Turkish-Greek disputes, upon which energy came, upon which Syria and Libya were stuck. And now we're dealing with a perplexed situation, which makes it exceedingly difficult to deal, especially in the US absence from the region for many, many years, that tried to sort of keep the lead on things, developing relations between Turkey and the European Union, and so on and so forth, that made it really, really difficult. So in a sense, just to finish with the political part, if you like, I would like to make 5 very concrete suggestions regarding the way forward. One would be to be constructive through deconstruction. What I mean to say is that we can deconstruct a little bit illusions of the past, the sense of the uniqueness of the dispute that I think also leads into perceptions about its intractability. No, unfortunately, in this part of the world, conflict is the norm rather than the exception. And so the uniqueness of disputes, I think, is something that feeds into them, and we could deconstruct this. Friends or enemies are not forever in international relations, thankfully so. So if we are realistic in our appraisal, and as I say, deconstruct some myths like the monopoly of legality, like the myths regarding energy, like the myth that Turkey is collapsing, or reversely, that there is a global alliance scheming to take down Turkey, then I think this is going to be a very good step forward. The second suggestion is that conflicts like the bilateral disputes between the two countries, as I say, have been allowed to escalate, and unfortunately at the moment have reached a stage where perhaps their solution is really difficult to imagine, because they have been allowed to become existential disputes, if you like, regarding the sense of legality, the national pride, justice, and all that. And this will make it exceedingly difficult, if ever, to tackle. However, if we change our mindset and go from a solution based mindset to a management mindset, we might have a way forward. That is, the way until now has been to think that the disputes will be solved and afterwards everything will fall into place. Why don't we change the mindset and think how, notwithstanding the possibility of the disputes being resolved in the future, we can contribute by constructively managing bilateral relations. And I have a very concrete idea in mind, like the 1999 to 2010 rapprochement between the two countries. Did not mean that there was a solution to the disputes. Did not also mean that the disputes were imminent. The solutions were imminent to these disputes. It was rather a mindset of cooperation until such a time has come. And I think the reality of those 10 years might not have been ideal, but it has been the best we have come up until so far. And I think there are ways of doing it forward now, because the challenges, the common challenges we face through the Ukraine war, and the realization of these objective outside problems, if you like, can make us think how important it would be to deal with a betterment of relations between the two. So, second point, moving from a solution fixated mode to a management mode. Thirdly, regarding energy. We need to build a pragmatic energy, a broader energy mix, if you like, in the Eastern Mediterranean. Some of the conflicts we had until now pertaining to energy, especially fossil fuels, are simply going to be obsolete very, very soon. That means that a lot of the baggage of the past is or should not be with us anymore, because there's nothing to fight about, since fossil fuels will be phased out very quickly. But also reversely, energy through renewable energy can give us excellent ways forward in cooperation, because renewable sources have a fantastic distinctive characteristic compared to fossil fuels. They're not like fossil fuels are commodities over which states can fight. The value added of renewable sources lies only in the exploration and common usage of such resources, if and when need or wish be. So the Aegean and the broader Eastern Mediterranean is blessed with a lot of sun and wind, and I think a common way of exploring this would be a fantastic way forward that would both tackle climatic challenges right today, but also pave the way towards the establishment of a mindset for cooperation that will be very good for the future. The next point would be that all of what's happening in the bilateral stage between Turkey and Greece is not only, as rightly said before, pertaining to the two countries. It has to do with the broader security West. It has to do with the former absence, but now perhaps to an extent return of the United States. It has to do with the future of EU-Turkey relations, where we need to establish a functional cooperation scheme, a functional relationship between the two, based first on a transactional mode and then on a rule-based stance. That, I think, is going to unlock a lot of opportunities in the way forward. Let me say a few things about the legal disputes and wrap it up there. Yücel Bey, I think, mentioned some of them, and I think these are well-established disputes. But from an international point of view, I would like to make 3 points. One is that when there is a will, there is a way. International law does not put limitations into the ways that states can work together on the basis of the law to resolve their disputes. It doesn't matter that Turkey has not signed the Law of the Sea Convention. This is an argument that I find surfaces a lot. It really doesn't matter if there is will between the two states and they can approach international adjudicative mechanisms. There is a way forward. I remind you by way of example that Israel has also not signed the Law of the Sea Convention, and this has not been an obstacle in the wish between Israel and Cyprus to sign a delimitation agreement, which they did. Recognition is also not a problem because, again, by way of example, both Turkey and Cyprus have been parties before the European Court of Human Rights, notwithstanding lack of recognition between the two. Again, because international law prioritizes the conflict resolution between states and does not wish to place legalistic obstacles to this respect. A third example is that now Lebanon and Israel are discussing, perhaps to no avail, but are in principle sitting on a table discussing maritime delimitations, and you know very well what the relations have been until recently between the two. So again, when there is a will, there is a way. And finally, to bring an argument from Norway, where I work, the 50 years of disputes between Norway and Russia regarding delimitation of maritime areas were solved in an afternoon through the drawing of a line on a map, exactly because there was a will at the time. So number one argument, when there is a will, there is a way. Number two, law is inextricably linked to politics, especially international law. The law itself is the outcome of a political process, and the very decisions to apply international law is a political decision. For example, in the case of the bilateral relations, it will be a political decision to approach the International Court of Justice or another international tribunal, and it will be a political decision to apply whatever decision comes from that organ. So just to have a purely legalistic discussion, I think is not helpful. The third point, public international law is dynamic. It is not static, and thankfully it is not static, because if it was, we would still have slavery and apartheid and all of that. But it cannot be applied or invoked in an a la carte fashion. It is not a utilitarian approach. It needs to be, I think, approached as a vehicle for progress, because it is such, and not as a hindrance mechanism, which it can also be if there is a will to go in that direction rather than the other way around. For instance, if there is belief of the monopoly of legality on any party, then we're leading to the wrong conclusions. So I would suggest that we identify the nature of the disputes more clearly, because that will give us the way forward in the way to deal with them. We should capitalize on thinking of the opportunities offered through realism now that, unfortunately, as I say, we're faced with greater evils like the war in Ukraine, and really be creative in the way we approach the disputes. The future of energy, clean energy in the region gives us ways. Just to take one example, this summer I think is going to be one of the hottest summers in history, and it's unfortunate, but expected that wildfires will be ravaging both countries. Hopefully not, but I think this is the possibility based on experience. This year is going to be a little different from the past years because there are no Russian firefighting equipment available. And a very concrete way would be perhaps for the two countries to discuss cooperation in firefighting in the absence of these external flight equipment to the betterment of the two. Remember what happened with the unfortunate earthquakes in 1999. The earthquakes in 1999 in both countries did not bring about rapprochement. Rapprochement was already designed in 1997, years before with Papandreou Gem. What they did is they allowed the legitimization of this rapprochement in the domestic constituencies of the two states, and hopefully the natural calamities of the summer could be designed in this way. So in this respect, I would suggest that we take concrete steps in this way, being creative. We also de-escalate, and I'm finishing up, Talha, de-escalate, if you like, the public debates which rage on both sides. It's unfortunate. I follow both TVs every night, and it can be very depressing with similar reflected attitudes on both sides, sometimes in mainstream rather than parochial media. It doesn't really help. We can take a little bit of a step back. Don't allow, for instance, the anniversaries that 2022 and 2023 are bringing up to further sour relations, in the realization that at the moment we cannot possibly afford anything but peace, as the Ukraine example shows. Thank you.
Much, Harry. So you really draw a very comprehensive picture, and and also your realistic assessment is very important, because starting from a more management-oriented perspective may be more realistic in the first instance, because as you mentioned, there are legalistic references in both perspectives. However, the mindset really shapes how they see the legalistic ground. And the issue of your emphasis on the political will is also an important thing. I mean, most parties really emphasize the legalistic aspects, legal standpoint, but when there is no political will, I think those legalistic arguments can be used for any purposes. And also, finally, your emphasis on the joint threats coming this summer or the coming years. I think it is important to prepare the publics for such an agreement. Which one? I mean, the agreement or conciliation do not occur easily, even at the face of joint threat. I think it is very important to prepare the parties for such a conciliation. But for the moment, we seem to be, there are mirror images from both sides. There's a portrayal of very negative, perspective for both parties. So thanks for drawing these, these distinctive political perspective for both parties. So my question is a quite practical question. So what may be the most practical approach or most practical way to turn this cycle of escalation to reverse? I mean, are there a list of priorities you suggest? As you mentioned, you follow the debates in both countries, and there are definitely mirror images. So what is your suggestions? You at some point mentioned the mindset, but do you recommend any concrete tool at that level?
So I would insist, especially on what Zuhal Hanum was saying on perceptions. And I think that at the moment we have allowed the public debates to be dominated on both by the harder elements, if you like. I would be hard pressed to find in the mainstream media of either of the country balanced voices these days, or they are the exception rather than the norm. But unfortunately, the sensationalist media, which is an international phenomenon, finds its way into the forefront. I also see a lot of, and I'm going to put quotes and 2 or 3 quotes, specialists, if you like, that have come up out of nowhere having an opinion, and obviously directing public opinion in some way. A lot of former army officers, a lot of people who theoretically know things. I think it's really a disservice. I know that popularity is one thing. I know that democracy and freedom of speech is to be respected, but we also need to think to what extent these are poisoning relations, especially when there is, how can I put it diplomatically, less of an absolute basis on truth on these things. So I think we can work on changing narratives. We can also present a realistic evaluation of true problems that are coming our way. I'm afraid that very soon climatic and environmental challenges are going to prevail in such a way that they will make the rest, or a large chunk of what we're discussing now, meaningless in a sense, because we're going to be facing with huge challenges in this respect. And I think we need to give the publics a realistic appraisal of where things are going, both challenges-wise, but also opportunities-wise. And finally, because opportunities sometimes come and go, there's a window of opportunity, let's say, on energy, but unfortunately we missed for the last 10 years because we went about it in the wrong way, to my mind. Let's not replicate the same mistake now. There is a way forward with renewable sources that don't have any of the baggage of the past, but again, they're not going to be forever. It's now a window of opportunity to capitalize on them, and these, I think, will create a positive agenda in the immediate future.
Yeah, I mean, this story about renewables and energy cooperation, I think, is something that is also promoted by Brussels. So wherever you go in Brussels, this is a main story. I hope this may also be emphasized as a significant issue that may be applied to relations with Turkey. I mean, we know the limitations of Turkish-EU relations in the last couple of years, but this subject, I think, has a huge potential if it is, approached by EU officials as well. It may turn into a source of joint action and joint, work. So that's an important highlight. So, Zuhal, I would like to emphasize certain things. I mean, as we know, in 1990s there was an element escalation. In early 2000, in 2020 summer, there is also escalation. I mean, is there a difference between this year's escalation? I mean, what makes it urgent this time? Or is there a major change in the mindset of the societies? Or is it continuation of similar problems in the misperceptions? Do you make such a differentiation in today's context?
There are many similarities. Of course, you can find, especially about the role of media. I remember there were so many writings about what media has done during Crimea crisis, because they were the real, let's say, the promoter of this crisis. And today I can see that the increasing interconnectedness of people through this, the communication means creates another the problem. As Harry mentioned rightfully, okay, the freedom of speech is something good, but on the other side, it's not somehow very good for the Greek-Turkish, the tension at the end. Some populist the discourses can be seen very attractive for so many people, but it doesn't help really for these people. If something happens, if any kind of friction creates a much larger conflict, what will happen? Who will benefit from this? Nobody questioned that. Everybody is so heroic. Everybody wants to underline this nice the hero stories, but on the other side, we know that no war is good. There is no good war. So this is must be kept as the rule in our mind. And this is the problem, unfortunately, right now. Another something similar is the lack of trust. Still, we can see the impact of the Cyprus problem as a kind of poisoning factor for Greek-Turkish dispute. And especially after the declining, prospect of Turkey to EU membership is also another negative impact. I strongly support this, the ex-synchronismos movement's perspective about this Greek-Turkish relations, because they were supporting that accepting Turkey as a part of this, the alliance, the European community was the real source of the resolution. So that can transform what you have as a kind of problem was the real way of finding a method for communication. Right now, we can see the opposite. What I see now in the Greek public, not on public politics, exclusion, push up Turkey outside of, let's say, all the platforms. This is the terrible thing, because not only about Greek-Turkish relations, you can see some similarities with the other crises. Multilateralism is a method created by humankind in order to overcome the real problem of humanity, the war. There is no another way. You have to come together around the table. It doesn't mean that you share let's say, share all the, let's say, the ideas. So I can see that this time something different, maybe because today we are talking about also a systemic earthquake. What's happening in international order is another problem. And in 1990s, we see that Turkey and Greece were parts of the same, let's say, the security structure, the Western security system. But now, if something changes, now this is the question: if Turkey can be taken out of this system, it can create new dimension. This is, I think, another problem. Okay, we see a change in international system. There is an earthquake, but what kind of system it will be? So the fall of a system does not equal with creation of an alternative. There is a period in between these two systems, and this is so dangerous. We always say that this transition of these systems can be very, very painful, and we see always big wars in between these systems. So that's why it's somehow terrifying for the IR scholars what may happen in this process, because we should be sure, as Greeks and Turks, we are not the rulers, the big players in this game, and at the end, it can be more painful for us when you compare our case with the bigger actors. So that's why I see maybe this is much more time for cooperation, actually, if the politicians follows alternative paths. That's why I refer this Venezuelism matter, because, you know, in politics, you can see many different groups in Turkey, in Greece, in Germany, in Holland. So every country have different groups inside. Who is the ruler is the problem. Who becomes the winner in this political game that can create a change? Imagine the Venezuelans was not the ruler, and the Anatolian, let's say, the invasion was not happened. So that can be different world. So especially for the Greeks of Anatolia, am I wrong? So these are so important turning points. That's why, as ordinary citizens, Greeks and Turks should be very much careful about the process of this transformation. We have to be very calm, and what's happening is the opposite, but the intellectuals especially must do something to stop this rising tension.
Yeah, I mean, there's an extreme focus on your own perception and your own rights and your own gains, but I think, it's also important to focus on what may be lost as a consequence of this accidental escalation and long-term process of tension. I mean, most escalation situations tend to, in the parties usually tend to avoid the possible, consequences, negative consequences of such, tensions. And it is also making misjudgments about the possible scenarios that may come after. So we already have historical examples the negative examples in the history. So sometimes I know that historical references and historical analogies are not good, but I think there is also, we may also at some point focus on what the both parties may lose as a consequence of such a escalation. I think during the escalation times, parties usually do not focus this side of the story. So we only see the side of the history or story that we want to understand. Thanks for this, explanations for the background. And Yücel Hocam, you highlighted and summarized the legalistic issues, legalistic problems concisely, and Harry mentioned that the major issue is that the lack of political will, rather than the political legalistic consequences. So, do you think the legal solutions are possible? And if so, what should be the right path to move parties in the direction of legalistic solution?
In fact, Harry described the possibilities, options for legal solutions, like going in international courts or third parties, and negotiation is another way go forward. But as Harry says, if there is a will, there are many ways actually in international law. Article 33 of UN Charter describes the means, the ways that the countries could use to settle their disputes. But unfortunately, when we start to talk about the solution of Greek-Turkish disputes, I think we should decide which term, whether it's short-term, mid-term, or long-term solutions we are talking about. In the short or mid-term, I believe that, unfortunately, there is no real will, in a sense, by two countries, Greece and Turkey, to settle these disputes. This basically depends on the perceptions and some feelings that Zuhal described. It's not possible tomorrow to persuade the public that we should find a way and settle somehow. Greece, first of all, should persuade its own public that there are real disputes, not only the delimitation disputes, but there are also some disputes creating tensions between two countries. And that's why I say that in the short term, at least, no Greek governments could dare to do this in the first place, for many political reasons. Unfortunately, in the short and mid-term, only some major powers have the key, I think, like US or European Union, which both have some effect on Greece and Turkey. If there are, pressing reasons in international politics, only these sides could press on two countries to come together and settle the dispute somehow. But in the long term, of course, it's possible for two countries only to come together and find a way for settlement. But unfortunately, it's a long term. But if we would like to settle, at least in the long term, we should start preparing our public from now on for possible solutions. So, in the short term, unfortunately, it's up to some major powers. That's not something good to say, that unfortunately this is the circumstances. And I think going to courts or some third parties or negotiations or serious negotiations, then I think there should be some press on sides to do this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems that the top-down approach seems to be at the hands of, influential third parties that really have responsible treatment. But at the same time, from the grassroots and the bottom up of the societies, I think there should be somehow readiness to, accept, get closer to solution approaches. So far, I think one of the consequences of this escalation is, unfortunately, with each escalation at the grassroots level, there is more readiness to engage into conflict rather than to engage into more constructive. So I think it is even better to froze the conflict, at least to keep that escalation further. I think the first priority probably seems to be, for the moment, is to stop this escalation, at least to freeze. And I think, great powers, US, EU, may not resolve these tensions, problems between Turkey and Greece, but they can easily stop the escalation. They can easily freeze the conflict. So I think they also have some responsibility at this stage, because there are already part of or members of the multilateral framework. So I think this is a very important and engaging discussion. We will continue to do this. I mean, for the moment, we just try to understand legalistic, perceptional backgrounds of the parties and what may be the limitation. And fortunately, I have seen that there are also very concrete recommendations by our panelists about ways to move forward. Not necessarily a full-scale solution, but at least steps that may help de-escalation and at least move to the direction of solution. So I would like to thank Associate Professor Zuhal, Mert, Uzuner, Professor Yücel, Acer, and Dr. Harry Tzimitras. So hoping to come together in another panel. Thanks for your contributions.